Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Anna Barlow, an Adult Services Librarian at the Troy Public Library, and it's my privilege to introduce tonight's program, which is sponsored by the Friends of the Troy Public Library. We're delighted that you can join us for Conversations with Cathy, Between the Lines with author Michael Zadoorian. Cathy Russ, the Troy Public Library Director, will be speaking with local author Michael Zadoorian about many things. His life experiences in Detroit that shape his writing, his award-winning books, such as The Lost Tiki Palaces of Detroit and Beautiful Music, both of which were selected in different years as Michigan Notable Books, The Leisure Seeker, which was adapted for a motion picture in 2018 with Helen Mirren and Donald Sutherland, and his most recent publication, The Narcissism of Small Differences, a comedy of compromises, their consequences, and the people we become because of them in our quest for a life that is our own and no one else's. Michael Zadoorian has received many other awards, such as the Kresge Artist Fellowship in the Literary Arts, the Columbia University Anna Hid Literary Award, and the Great Lakes Great Reads Awards. He was also longlisted for the International Impact Dublin Literary Award, among others. His work has appeared in numerous publications such as the Literary Review, Beloy Fiction Journal, American Short Fiction, and the Huffington Post, in the anthologies Bob Seger's House, Looping Detroit, and On the Clock. He has worked as a copywriter, journalist, voiceover talent, shipping room clerk, and plant guard for Chrysler. A lifelong resident of the Detroit area, he lives with his wife in a 1936 bungalow filled with cats and objects that used to be in the houses of other people. If you have any thoughts or questions during tonight's program, please place them in the Q&A section. Michael and Cathy will answer these towards the end of the program. We would also appreciate if you would fill out the brief survey that will appear on your screen after the program. So I know that you're going to enjoy this evening's program, and with that, I will give you Cathy and Michael Zadoorian.
Thanks, Anna. So hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm well, Cathy. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited I get to have a chat with you.
I think this will be fun. We had a good chat yesterday, and now we know that we can chat. We are chatters.
Now we know we can sustain a conversation.
Yes, always a good thing to know.
Well, I thought if it's all right with you, I would like to start out talking about your latest book, which is like this, everybody. It's called The Narcissism of Small Differences. So it came out in May, and I wonder if you could just tell us about it. Just summarize it for us, and anything really exciting that you think we ought to know about.
Well, it's a book that I think some of my other books had a little bit easier of a elevator speech to them. But I mean, in some ways, it's I set out to write sort of a comic novel, like kind of a comedy of manners, sort of. And so it's a story of two people, Joe and Anna, who have been living together for a long time, like 15 years, not married, no kids, no mortgage. And they're sort of, as they approach 40, they're kind of, I think, coming to this point where they're almost, they're kind of evaluating their lives. And I think, as we often do at that time of our lives, as we sort of hit midpoint. And, so it's, I do think it's a funny book, but it is, as Anna was saying, that it is a lot about, I think it's about love and work and, kind of selling out and buying in. And I think it is about the, sort of compromise and the stuff we have to do. Everybody has to compromise. So it's about the things we do to survive in the world. And but sometimes, the people we become because of those compromises. But, all that stuff aside, I think, I wanted to write a funny book. And so I think it is, it's a very chatty book. And, but it also, on top of everything, it's really sort of a love story too, between these two people that kind of have a little bit of a kind of a couple's identity crisis, I think, at this particular point in their lives.
Well, I agree with you 1,000,000,000%. For everybody who may not have read this book yet, it's like Michael's other books. I read this book in 2 days. It's a fast read because it flows so well. And one of the things that I really appreciate about your writing style is the dialogue. It's like you're listening in on people talking. It's like real people, real conversations. So, do you have trouble with dialogue? Does that flow easily for you? How do you find writing conversation to come to you?
Oh, well, that's a great question. As it turns out, I kind of love writing dialogue. Really, it
But
might
some people
very well.
don't. Some
Yeah,
people
I
find it really
know.
hard.
I also think that sort of maybe on those days, I generally make myself write at least yeah, Monday through Friday. That's kind of I've always had a job for a long time. I had a part-time job, and I would go into work in the afternoon, so I would have to do all my fiction writing in the mornings. And so I'd always tell myself, you have to write 2 or 3 pages today, just depending on how hard I was on myself at that time. And there were some days that you knock that out, okay, that was fine. And other days it is like pulling teeth. I mean, I'm not a like I must wait for the muse to strike sort of writer. I just like, sit down and write. And but I do think that sometimes dialogue comes because it's like I know it will I love writing it, and it will fill pages faster too. So if on those days I suspect, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that dialogue comes a lot on those days where it's like I just don't know what to write, so I'm going to write some dialogue. And what would happen if these two people start talking about this problem right now? But I do love writing it, and it's always just a pleasure for me to write a conversation. And then in later drafts, it'll be more like, okay, what are they doing while they talk, and what's the body language, what are they're saying this literally, but what are they actually kind of saying? What are these characters, really talking about in some ways? But dialogue is definitely sort of one of the joys of writing for me. And some days the joys of writing are few and far between.
I have a friend whose dad was a writer, and his first rule in this is, I don't think this is original to him, but the first rule is butt in chair. Put your buns in the chair,
Absolutely, I
because
really
you're not going to
think.
get anything done if you don't.
Yeah, and more than anything, I mean, sometimes people will ask me for, okay, a writerly advice too, which I don't know what to say, but the main thing is like if you're going to start something, just keep going, and that is sitting down and doing it, as painful as it sometimes feels like, that really is sitting down, writing, and pretty much know that whatever you write is probably gonna feel like crap. And and sometimes, often it will be, but then other days you'll go back over what you read the day or wrote the day before, and it's like, wait, this is not crap at all. This actually is about something, and then other days it will be crap. But still, I think it's important to just get to the end of something, whether it's a chapter, or a story, or just the end of a book. And I mean, anytime anybody ask me about writing, and if they say, I've been working on a book, and I've finished my first draft, and that's, for me, that is grounds for congratulations right there,
Oh,
because
gosh.
I think that's really one of the hardest things to do, is to just keep going to the end too, because a lot of times your instincts, which aren't always the best thing, instincts are to like, I must go back over what I wrote yesterday, and make it beautiful and make it flow. And it's like, yeah, that's a kind of writerly trap, I think, for me, because you can sit there and polish that first chapter as much as you want, and spend 6 months doing that, and all you'll have is first chapter, when in reality, if you get all the way to the end, okay, you've got a book. Now is the time to start polishing. Now is the time to figure out what your book's about, and like going off into too many writerly sort of
No, because actually what that does for me is it prompts what brings, because part of the reason I'm a sort of writer wannabe, and the reason I don't is because I started out as an editor. So I am very much that person who will write 3 sentences and go back and make them perfect, and I stop there. But I guess just when you were talking, what occurred to me is that if you polish that first chapter, you never know how it ends. And so do you, when you're writing a book, do you map out your story so you know how it's gonna end, or do you let it evolve and see where it goes?
Yeah, I guess I'm probably more of the latter there. I had somebody at an event just ask me a question. They asked me if I was a plotter or a pantser, and at first I had to say, I don't know what either of those things are, you know. And they explained it to me. Is someone who's actually plotting, who plots and, you know, plans everything out, and then there's the pantser, the person who just kind of like sees where it takes them. And I am most definitely a pantser. I will just keep going, and which is scary, which is sometimes when you're writing, you're like, I don't know where this is happening, you know, where this is going to go. And in a way, it is sort of a, you know, a leap of faith. You have to think that, okay, at some point I will figure out what this is all about. So maybe that's why it's important for me to get to the end to find out if indeed it is about anything. And sometimes I don't really, it takes a couple of drafts for me to finally understand what I'm writing about. You know, what is, you know, to really understand sort of the inner workings of what I've been doing. And I think there's something to do with that sort of more going by the sort of the unconscious route than the, like, okay, a 4th chapter is going to be this, 5th chapter will be this. And that's perfectly great way to be. There are just some writers that are that way. And then there are some that, which, you know, like me, which is, you know, it's the proverbial driving in the fog and you can only see, you know, 100 feet ahead of you. And so yeah, it can be, you know, it can be a little scary sometimes doing that, but it's basically just what works for me.
Well, for me as a reader, I think it definitely works in the Narcissism of Small Differences, because it's a journey for the couple too. And it's, you know, I don't want to give too much away for our audience, but it's kind of like, well, where are they going to end up? You know, like, you know, there's some questions that come up that you think, I think it's going to go this way, and then it goes this way. And then you think, well, and if it were too structured or too plotted, I think it would almost feel artificial, you know, or a little bit too facile, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah, and that maybe hopefully that is one of the advantages of this. I mean, you always hear writers talking about that the characters are dictating what's going to happen. And, you know, I think there probably is a certain amount of that to some extent, just because when I don't necessarily know what's going to happen, although if I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know if I can honestly say that the characters know what's going to happen, but let's say they do. Maybe they just know better than I don't know, but it's always interesting to see what happens. And this book wound up being kind of a different sort of situation for me too, just because I had, you know, the book takes place in 2009 Detroit, and that is actually when right around when I wrote it. I wrote it,
really?
yeah. I wrote it probably started it maybe late 2007 and finished it around probably early 2009, and just decided that was going to be where the book took place, just because also by 2009, you know, the nation's economy, Detroit, everything was in a horrible, you know, downturn. And so it seemed like a good time to have the book take place And so yeah, but I wrote the book, and this is where that sort of pantser kind of mentality starts to eat at you a little bit. And you think, oh, well, maybe I wrote it, I finished it, I gave it to my agent, and, we got all kinds of great feedback on it. The editors were like saying all kinds of nice things right before they turned it down. And it was and at a certain point, you wind up having to, okay, my agent said, I think it's gone to everywhere we can take it. And you come to that, sort of horrible place as a writer where you just like, okay, well, I'm just going to put it in the drawer for a while.
Yeah.
And it does not feel good. And part of you questions everything, your whole process, okay, I don't know why this one didn't work or whatever, but again, everyone had nice things to say as they were turning it down. And so yeah, the book really kind of stayed in a virtual drawer for like almost 10 years probably. And I happened to mention it to my editor at Keshik, who they had just published Beautiful Music, my last book, and they, yeah, we'd like to take a look at it. And they took it on. And I think part of that might have just been also that, the book kind of turned into a period piece. It was sort of interesting when I read it over. I was like, oh, I'm not changing this time period at all, because A is kind of a sort of period of crisis. Detroit is definitely one of the characters in the book, and it's kind of a period of crisis for the city. It's a crisis period for Joe and Anna, the characters. And so I realized, oh yeah, I have a period piece now. And I think the book worked better as a period piece. Also, happily, because I think sort of the national conversation about Detroit had just kind of changed so drastically in that 10 years time. And, we sort of went from the kind of shame of America, blighted city of industrial wasteland kind of thing, to like, hey, Detroit's the new comeback kid. Look how great they're doing now, even though there was still are many problems, but still that just became the new media. The what the media was saying about us, and so that made it, I think, a little easier for people to say, oh, kind of a love story about creative people in Detroit doesn't seem like such a ridiculous thing now. Now that Detroit's kind of cool. So who knows? But it's been an interesting journey with this particular book, definitely.
Well, I never would have known that it was a 10-year-old book, because and that story is fascinating to me, because when I was reading it, like you said, it's a period piece, but the period is 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And part of what I really enjoyed is, I remember that time, and I remember when things were starting to go down. But it's almost, I don't want to say nostalgic, but it's kind of like, oh, I remember that. But the writing is very fresh. Like, I wouldn't have thought that it was a 10-year-old book in a billion years, truly. And one of the things that I like a lot is all of the call outs to Detroit and landmarks in Detroit and things about Detroit, because it's not so very far away that you can remember that and think, oh, I remember that, the Chinbiki before it got torn down, so, I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, it winds up, well, and that is one of those things too, and I think without sounding like a pompous ass, I mean, I think there are times when, not so much that a book is ahead of its time or anything like that. It's just that, maybe the world just needs to catch up a year or two or 5 or 10, and to make something feel, whatever, to make something older feel fresher, and I think it's an interesting, and part of me was like, oh my God, is this something I should hide, that that the book was, basically 10 years old. And I thought, no, I mean, I made it part of the narrative, sort of when you have a book come out, you kind of need to, like I said, you have to have your elevator speech, you have to have your backstory, and I realized, oh, there's my backstory, is that this thing happened, and I wound up writing an article about it for LitHub about, and just about how the book, the world maybe wasn't ready for this kind of book, this sort of kind of love story or whatever about creatives in Detroit, when everybody thought of Detroit as just sort of like, a wasteland. So, and then suddenly, yeah, all right, this changed. But it was an interesting thing to do, to kind of examine some of those possible reasons why a book, doesn't get published at one time and then does later, because a lot of it has, and the sad thing about publishing is a lot of it has nothing to do with the quality of the writing. It's just about, I think editors are always sort of, taking the temperature of America, or like what feels zeitgeisty. Oh my God, I can't believe I
I
said
think if you titled
zeitgeisty.
it "The Girl with the Narcissism of Small Differences," you probably could have sold it.
Yes, girl,
Girl on the
gone.
train,
Yeah, the
girl with the
girl. Yeah,
dragon
yeah,
tattoo.
yeah, girl.
There's all,
Something. I often see naming trends, and they will be so transparent, and that's exactly what you just
yeah.
called one out. That whole the girl this, and and I think it probably did start with girl with the dragon tattoo, and girl gone, and then a
Oh,
few
gone from me.
more. And I see those kind of things in like indie bands and also independent films. You'll just see, oh, this is the way everyone's naming their book, their film, their music right now. So it's really funny, but it makes you realize that all this stuff, like it or not, is still to a great extent, market driven, which
Yeah.
bums me out, because every book winds up, this is my fourth novel, and I have a collection of stories too, and they have all been, just their own sort of struggle to get published. And there was my first novel, Secondhand, was published in 2000. My second, The Leisure Seeker, did not come out until 2009. And it didn't take me 9 years to write that book. It took me 9 years to get another book published. And then it took me another 9 years to get Beautiful Music published. So again, did not take me 9 years, but so in a lot of ways, it's been, um, like four first novels, and the
Yeah.
only reason, and this one, Narcissism, just came out, 2 years after Beautiful Music. And I felt like I finally broke my like 9 year curse between books. And then I realized, oh yeah, but I wrote the book 10 years ago. So it's the
I
same
can't do the
difference.
math on that. I think there's a negative number in there somewhere.
Yes, I think you're right. I think there's some sort of, integer that I don't want to hear. But and we'll see. I've got I'm working on a new book now, and and I try to be optimistic, but I still, you never really know. You just don't know if. So I promote every book as if it's my last. I think that,
It's your baby, the art's your, it's yours, and you wanna give it its due for sure.
absolutely, yeah, and I mean, definitely to a certain extent is kind of just trying to let people know that it exists. Because a lot of books get published, and that's happening right now during the pandemic. I mean, a lot of books have come out during, basically since March to right now. All the new fall books are out now. And a lot of books have just sort of, they just came and went. And it's tough too, especially when you spend a couple of years writing something and trying to get an agent and trying to get a publisher, and then to have it come and go so quickly. You sort of want to, you kind of want to milk that moment, at least,
Oh
if
gosh,
for
yeah.
nothing else than just ego's sake. And but you want to give your book a chance. And so it's been tough trying to promote the book in these times right now, and so it's an interesting thing, and even things like libraries. I know. How many, our libraries even ordering all the new books because so many of them aren't even open yet, or just limited hours or just curbside and such. So it's a dicey situation right now.
Well, and I think too that the competition for limited attention, because the pandemic is, uppermost, and then, if you're a parent, you've got kids maybe going back to
Right.
school, and so, how do you get your book front and center? But I think in the Detroit area, I would hope that you would have an advantage because there's so much cool stuff about Detroit and about the suburbs. There was a part in the book where Anna and her friend Adrian go to a TGI Fridays, and just the description, I thought, I wonder if that's TGI Fridays that used to be across from City Hall in Troy. So what's really fun is to go through and pick out things and go, oh, I know what that is, and to challenge yourself, like, have I been there? Do I know that?
That is definitely something I do, and some have said perhaps a little too much, but I think that for me, that's sort of when my writing felt like it was coming together and it was feeling like me, when I started to just write about where I was from and the people I knew and Detroit, and so it all that stuff's important to me, and I've ranted about this in various, Q&As and in print and everything. It was sort of like, does the world really need another New York City novel? I'm sorry. I love them too. So many of the older books I read, and I read a lot of older books, that it'll be like New York in the 20s, New York in the 40s, New York in the 70s. Right now I'm reading some, but it's like, do we really need that many? And so for me, it's important to write about where I'm from. It's important. I think it's interesting to read about a city, a place that you don't know, you haven't heard that much about, or the things you've heard in Detroit's case for a lot of people are not particularly flattering. And to know that there are people living lives in Detroit just like they're living lives in New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Minneapolis or Milwaukee, and Detroit winds up being its own really interesting character. I think this is a fascinating place filled with all kinds of creativity, and I'm always doing my boosterism, but and so it's important to me to write about where I'm from, and it might also have something to do with the fact that I've only lived here my entire life, and it's really so it makes sense that I would write about it. But it is important to me, and I don't seem to. I would write about being somewhere else, but so far it hasn't really happened. I keep writing about Detroit because it's endlessly fascinating to me.
Well, and like you said about books about New York, if I'm, here I am in Royal Oak right now, but if I read a book about New York City, it might make me want to visit New York City. And I think that your books incorporate that aspect to Detroit, that the way that Detroit is presented is not some barren, horrible hellhole. There's a great deal of affection for Detroit. And I think, and one of the things I want to talk about was the old buildings that I think Joe's love or interest in the old buildings in Detroit, and some of the ones especially that are decaying. It's almost like it's a subplot, but Detroit itself is almost a character. But there's a part, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday, that I wondered if you could read it and share it with the audience, about the Detroit work ethic and being from Detroit, and because I felt that was very, it resonated with me, and I felt that just reading that part, I could feel your affection for the city. So if you have it handy, would you share it with us?
I do have it handy. Can anyone tell that we rehearsed this part?
How about that?
I don't know, but I do have it. I have it right here. And yeah, that's always important to me. And that's that's been always one of the things that is fun to write about, kind of our ways, I guess, which I think is part of what really differentiates us from other cities, other places. Anyways, it's chapter 5 from the Narcissism of Small Differences, the chapter called The Detroit Way. This was one of the things Joe loved about Detroit. Even the creative folks, the people who were getting their work out there, their music or writing or art, hardly ever quit their crummy day jobs. The only people who did were musicians who had to because their bands were touring Europe all the time. Places like Berlin and Amsterdam and Milan absolutely loved Detroit music and pretty much everything to do with the place. Strange. To most of America, it was messed up Detroit, forgotten manufacturing wasteland, decaying buildings, murder capital of the nation. But to Europe, Detroit was the embodiment of uber-urban, act-industrial, proto-apocalyptic Rust Belt cool. At least it was to the extremely well-paying Euro culture magazines for which he often wrote about the Detroit scene. Europeans were hip to the positive things going on in Detroit, the music, the art, the history, the grit and spirit of the people. And even if they sometimes overappreciated the aesthetics of Blight, they at least understood the way the whole place somehow inexplicably got under your skin. Even if a Detroit band made it big over there, you'd still hear them say things like, I could go back to doing upholstery work if I had to. It was that twisted Midwestern work ethic, the factory rat DNA that threaded through Detroiters, embedded by generation after generation of immigrants who put their heads down and ground it out in a loud, grimy, windowless place for 30 or 40 years because that was just what you did. There weren't discussions about happiness or fulfillment or self-actualization. You shut up and went to work because people were counting on you. Then, after all those great-grandfathers and grandfathers and fathers and mothers who toiled silently and often bitterly, came the spoiled generations after, the ones that went to college, that thought it was their right to be happy at a job. That was Joe, of course, who had deluded himself into thinking that he could actually make a living as a freelance writer. He used to think it was okay not having that much money, always buying cheap beer and thrift store clothing. It was officially part of his lifestyle. It was part of Anna's, too, at one time. But now, here in his late 30s, being poor didn't seem like so much fun anymore. Anna had been making good money for close to 10 years. Lucky thing for him, too, because by now he would probably be living under the 8 Mile Road overpass, cadging rumpled singles from passing cars, like the guys he would encounter coming home late after seeing bands at the bars in Hamtramck. 2:30 in the morning, and there they were, with their 6 coats and 3 hats, their overstuffed shopping carts, and their greasy, creased soft cardboard God bless signs, staring blankly at you at the traffic light. These days, Joe had been giving them the stray dollars that he'd find wadded in his bar pockets. He'd look them in their eyes, all roomy and broken, so not to seem like one of those people who didn't think of them as humans. He didn't like it, though, that time that one of them wanted to shake his hand. Joe did it, but he couldn't get the little bottle of hand sanitizer out of his glove box quickly enough once he was down the street. Which was another thing. When did he become one of those people with hand sanitizer in his glove compartment? Which that ending of that suddenly became weirdly prescient with now all the talk about hand sanitizer. So that was from chapter 5 of.
Yeah, no, that's and that kind of ties into, so Joe and Anna are on the cusp of 40, and they both turned 40 in the course of the book, and it's kind of freaking them out a little bit that they're 40, especially because Joe anyway is still living in many ways the life he was living when he was 25 and 30 and 35. And in the book you call that the broken hipster. And
Right.
did you coin that, or how did that come to you? I just thought that was great because I was never a hipster. I couldn't even begin to aspire to that, but I loved it and I got it. I thought that was great.
Well, yeah, that something. Now that you mentioned that, I'm trying to think if I did make that up or if a friend of mine made it up. I honestly can't remember. Let's say I made it up. What the heck? But it was just something that I think we probably a phrase that did come about right around when, probably around encroaching middle age when you think, when you, and Detroit has lots of people, I mean, certainly like the people I was just reading about, the people in bands, and you can tell who is still in a band in their 50s in Detroit. It's like, okay, you got the black dyed hair and the black dyed soul patch, and you're pulling it off fine. Still, but so that became a kind of a thing, and the broken hipster thing. But it basically, just aging people that probably, didn't necessarily take the same life route that a lot of people did, and so people will call them hipsters or whatever. And do you want me to read a little bit of that part, or?
Yeah, I think we have time, and then we'll start. We'll answer people's questions.
Okay, all right. It's from chapter 14 of this book, The Narcissism of Small Differences. I try to hold up the book as much as I can. Anyways, chapter 14, The Mythos of the Broken Hipster. On Joe's 40th birthday, he and Anna had a quiet evening of beers and burgers over at the Midlands, where they ran into Joe's friend, Chick. Well, 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 said Chick, nodding and smirking. If it isn't my two favorite 40-year-olds. Joe sighed. I really should never tell you anything. Chick grinned at this. No, you really shouldn't. Thankfully, you never seem to learn. He raised his hand. Hi, Anna. How are you? Hi, Chick. You just come by to harass Joe on his birthday? She quietly placed her hand on Joe's thigh and gave it a squeeze under the table. Actually, I'm here to meet a young woman at the bar. Joe brightened at the mention of this. Oh, another one of your Match.com hussies? He leaned back in his seat, placed his hand over Anna's on his leg. Sure she's old enough to enter a bar? Probably good that you're meeting in public. Wouldn't want to get caught up in some child predator sting operation. Chick suppressed a smile and lowered his head as if saddened by this exchange. Oh, okay, great. That's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be, huh? I come over to offer a friendly greeting, and you both viciously attack me. Joe shrugged. You attacked first. You called us your 40-year-old friends. You are my 40-year-old friends. What am I supposed to say? Well, a simple hello would suffice. Oh, of course, a return to civility. Isn't that what all you oldsters want? Fine then, he said, doffing an imaginary chapeau. I bid you both good day. You two enjoy your early bird special. Chick started to head back toward the bar. I'll see you broken hipsters later. Broken hipsters. That was the part that got to Anna. She was used to Chick and Joe giving each other grief, but that expression kind of caught her off guard. Was it the subtle reference to osteoporosis, which she was now officially starting to fret about? It certainly wasn't because she thought of herself as any kind of a hipster. She wasn't even sure what a hipster was these days, other than the poseurs who swanned around various neighborhoods of Brooklyn with their tribal body modifications and trust funds, their oversized eyewear and undersized pant wear, who had turned the term into an insult. Even when she had been clearer on the concept, she'd rarely been called one. In fact, the last time was at her 20-year high school reunion. Sarah Kettering, a former fellow band nerd turned roundish, smug hockey mom living far, far away from scary Detroit with 4 kids and a sensible mid-sized husband. When Sarah called Anna a hipster, it too was used as an insult. How dare you not live a life exactly like mine, was what Anna actually heard. Compared to Sarah, Anna actually did feel like a hipster. Then there were the people who thought everyone who worked in the creative department of an ad agency was a hipster of some sort. True, it seemed as though Anna was constantly surrounded by good-looking young'uns with art-directed tattoos and ironic facial hair who spent a lot of money on hair product and meticulously shrunk, artfully wrinkled clothes from Urban Outfitters, designed to make the wearers look like they just crawled out of a multi-partnered bed. Of course, they weren't the only people in the Detroit agency creative department. There were also smelly record store loners who name-checked insanely obscure bands, former high school jocks who fervently hid their artistic tendencies, compulsively complimenting bipolar tantrum queens, hallway roving rumor mongers, mechanic gays who loved their cars as much as any GM retiree, Mensa level cubicle hoarders, bookish roller derby girls, deer hunters whose fathers questioned their sissy profession, earth/soccer hybrid moms, as well as people so normal you're sure that they will be the ones to come in and shoot up the place on the day they get laid off. There were all these and many more. Because it's difficult to peg oneself as a workplace cultural stereotype, Anna had never really figured out her own category. Passively competitive, child-free, quasi-feminist? At her advanced, for advertising, age, did it really matter? Yet, broken hipster sort of fit, at least for her and Joe, and maybe for a lot of other people they knew who were getting older and still figuring out what to do with that information. The people she worked with now were almost all younger than her. When she spoke to people in their 20s, they were always up on the latest music, games, videos, websites, social networking, etc. Anna kept up fairly well, but it was starting to seem like a lot of work. Everything changed so quickly and so often. And now the kids were suddenly anti-technology. Cameras with film, monaural record players, gearless bicycles, typewriter parties. What was next? Return of the telegraph? Were the handlebar mustaches going to be tapping out Morse code while they waited the half hour for their pour-over coffees? And damn it, why did it look like they were having so much fun doing it all? Yes, these were exactly the sorts of things that a broken hipster would say. So there you go, my whatever about disposition, about the broken hipster. Yes.
Well,
So yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, what I was going to say is I read that part and all I could think of, because it kind of, Joe and Anna are also dealing with their perception of who they are versus who they are.
Absolutely.
And all it could make me think of is when I go to a concert with my friends, I'm really cool. When I go to a concert with my 12-year-old niece, I am the most uncool person in the place. So, and it's just really, really got to me. So, all right.
That's a great way to put it. Yes, absolutely.
It kind of hits you in the face. So, all right, are you ready for some questions?
I am ready.
All right. Anna, are you there with questions?
Yep, I am. Okay.
All right.
So,
Voice of
first
God,
one.
Anna.
Beautiful music was awesome. It got me through the COVID lockdown. Would you ever consider picking up Danny Yazemski's life with more beautiful music, or are you a one and done writer?
Wow, I don't know who's writing this, but it's like a paid shill for me. That is actually what I'm working on right now. Is Danny as an adult, as a man who's been in radio for 40 years, and so he is he's kind of he's a classic rock DJ and has been one for about 30 of those 40 years. And so, yeah, and it's actually the book that I set out to write initially when I started Beautiful Music. And I kind of got sidetracked by the idea of this character as a boy and as a teenager. And so, I kind of think maybe maybe I wasn't ready to write the book that I'm writing now. And so I wound up writing beautiful music, and it just kept going. And I really liked the idea of a coming of age book through music. And so I just kept going with it. And I was like, I don't know if what I'm writing, if it's a coming of age or a YA novel or what, but I'm going to keep writing it. And so it's just been in the past year, I've been working on this new book about Danny decades later. And well, I'm really liking the book, and Danny goes through a lot of changes as an adult, as well as he did, as much as he did as a child. But you also kind of see some of some of the damage done by his childhood in this book. But I'm excited about it. So hopefully, as I said before, who knows? Hopefully, somebody will want to publish it. But thanks for asking. It was such a good question too, and I'm glad the book helped during COVID. First 3 months of pandemic for me, I couldn't read a book. I just was so distracted. I just couldn't stay focused. I started like 7 books, so I'm glad it helped.
Well, I think you've answered the next question almost. The next one is, I've been a fan of yours since The Leisure Seeker. When and what is your next book? Also enjoyed beautiful music and Narcissism.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much
there you go.
for all the support. I appreciate it. Yes, I did. I didn't mean to give your question short shrift, dear watcher, dear viewer. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm working on. So, and people have asked me too. It's like, so I guess there won't be a sequel to The Leisure Seeker, and it's like, no, it won't be, unless it was a prequel. But anyway.
There you go.
Okay. Well, we'd like to know what work you do in the years besides writing while you're waiting for a publisher to pick up your books.
You pretty much described the last 30 years of my life. You know something? For the first time, I am happily unemployed, I guess. I had a job in advertising, actually, for many, many years. I worked at Campbell Ewald, formerly in Warren, now in downtown Detroit. And they just were gracious enough to let me work part-time there for a couple of decades. And I don't know how I worked it out, but it was fantastic. They let me work in the afternoons. I worked in the afternoons 5 days a week, and I would get up in the morning and write fiction, and then I would go and make a living. And I am eternally grateful to that company for letting me do that, because and people kept saying, you got the deal, Zadoorian. I don't know what you did, but it's true, I did. It was great. And then came time. It was time. I just thought, I'm gonna leave for a while and see what happens. And so I left Campbell Ewald happily of my own accord. And yeah, gosh, I probably got the news about The Leisure Seeker like 3 months later that they were going to make it into a film. So that helped enormously in my ability to just write fiction for a living. So that's what I've been doing.
Okay, thank you. How did you come up with the Canadian Mist and Faygo as the signature cocktail in beautiful music? This mini high school class of 1975 alumnus, PA announcement reader, and Corvette album shopper is sipping one right now, and it must have been an acquired taste.
That's so funny. I love that question. You know something? It just kind of got it just sort of developed into that. It's one of those things that, sort of as you write, sometimes you do stuff, and then you realize later that, okay, you figure things out. At least that is for me, and that just might be a certain denseness on my part. But after a while, I did know somebody who did drink Canadian Mist and a 7 Up. It's basically a 7 and 7. But you know, and Uptown by Faygo was a popular mixer at that time, and I just liked the idea of Uptown, just because Danny's mom sort of wanted to be a little more uptown. I think that I'm putting way more significance into it. But there was also something about Canadian Mist too that felt like there's a lot of static and sound and things like that in that book. And also Canada pops up a lot. And so that felt, the more I wrote it, the more I decided that I needed to make that her signature drink. And
Okay.
so, but thank you for noticing that. That makes me very happy.
Okay, so we have about 7 minutes and about 4 more questions. So,
Okay.
have you ever felt that your
Lightning
characters...
round.
Have you ever...
No, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, so speed it up, Mike. No more long-winded answers.
Have you ever felt that your characters were arguing with you about the direction a book was going?
Wow, that's a great question too. You know, I think they wind up, you know, I think they probably steer the boat as much as I do, really. And sometimes I think I'm a little more inclined to listen to them than me, you know, but sometimes I will just, it'll be like, why do things keep going this way? And like I said with Beautiful Music, I kept writing the story of him as a teenager, and after a while I just like, all right, I'm going with this. And so I think if we do argue, I'm probably more likely to be the one that backs down in a fight, which probably a lot like Dan.
Okay. After having a manuscript on the shelf for 9 or so years, how do you stay positive about your work and shopping it around? And have you ever resubmitted to the same publishers?
Oh God, yes. I've submitted to the same publishers over and over again. I mean, sometimes it is very hard to stay positive. In between Secondhand, which published in 2000, and Leisure Seeker 2009, I had written another book that went nowhere. It was like kind of and I've told this story before, but it was not like a real high point in my life. My father had gotten really ill with Alzheimer's, and you know, and this book had gotten turned down. Actually, I had the same publisher at W.W. Norton, and she was looking at the book, at the new book, and kind of that whole process took about 1.5 years before she finally just said, I don't think we're going to take this book. And it was pretty heartbreaking. And then right around then, not long after, my dad passed away, and you know, and I think I came about as close to quitting writing as I ever have. And then I just kind of got mad, and I just felt like, you know, I don't care. I'm not going to quit writing. I'm going to keep doing this, and they can all go to hell, you know. And it's a library. Hell is okay, I know. So you know, so I just kept writing, and I had a 10-page story about an older couple who go on kind of a last vacation together. And I for some reason, I just sort of felt like I could write a book out of that. And so I just said, I'm just going to write this for me. I'm not going to worry about anything else. And I just wrote it. And, you know, so that wound up becoming The Leisure Seeker. So but it can be extremely disheartening at times. And the publishing world particularly has, I never know what they're going to do to me next. It's always like, we're going to figure out some new way to mess with you, Mike. So you keep on your toes.
Okay. Another question. Are you Joe?
Oh,
That's a great question.
I was going to ask that myself. So yay for the
you know,
person.
yeah, there are definitely Joe-like qualities to me. I'm probably a little more pragmatic than Joe. You know, but I think there's probably just, and this sounds horribly, well, narcissistic is to say that, you know, there's probably just as much of me in Anna as there is in Joe. and and I worked in advertising for a long time, and I met all kinds of awesome, badass women, and Anna, I think, was definitely influenced by a lot of them, as well as Adrian, her work buddy and partner, and there's definitely aspects of this was an interesting book too, because this is the first book that kind of changed perspectives. Every chapter,
Yeah.
one chapter is Joe, and then Anna, Joe, Anna, and so yeah, I feel like there were some things. I mean, I definitely tried my hand at freelance writing, and I didn't really have the stomach for it. It was nerve-wracking for me, and Anna's worked as a long time ad person, so I definitely knew that business, and so in a lot of ways, this is my advertising book too.
Okay. Okay, a couple of comments. I just cheered out loud when you said that you're writing another book about Danny. So
Hopefully
I
some
think it's going to be
publishers will too.
We had beautiful music as part of our Troy Public Library virtual book club. And so we had a couple of comments from there. And someone would like to have an unofficial soundtrack compiled to beautiful music that you
what
could
a
listen
good
along to the
idea.
tunes as they appear in the book and really get what Danny was listening to and feeling.
Well, I can do that. Go to my website, michaelzadoorian.com, 2 O's in Zadoorian, and go to, I think, media. I believe my Italian publisher did like a Spotify playlist of like almost all the songs in the book. And it's pretty awesome. It's fairly long too. I mean, there's a lot of songs mentioned, and it's kind of cool. So I mean, you would need Spotify, but there's definitely, at least if nothing else, it's a list that you can click on, and but it's kind of cool. And if you have Spotify, you just go right to it and just look up Zadoorian beautiful music. But it was kind of a cool thing they did.
That's really super to know.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one last thing, and I'm just going to get it through quickly because I think it's a really cool topic. The arts are so important to our survival, especially in our formative years when our lives are so uncertain. In beautiful music, surely Danny had such a great deal going against him on top of that. We are all missing out a lot on the arts during this pandemic, which is especially difficult on young folks. Could you elaborate a little bit on that topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think whoever wrote that was really eloquent about it. I think that's absolutely it. And for Danny and beautiful music, I mean, music is what saves him. It is what sets him on a particular life path. It's his solace when everything seems to be falling apart in his life, and that is exactly why we need that right now, especially for young people too, to just learn about these things and to be exposed to them, and to find out. It's like, oh, I didn't even know what a poet was, but now I after reading this book or seeing a Zoom conversation somewhere, whatever, I want to be a poet, or I want to be a playwright, or I want to be a musician, or whatever. That's the thing. Those are the things that the arts can do, and it's and that's the wonder of it. And when it thrills me when I hear about some young person who's like, okay, she's 15 and she's already got a band, and something like that. I think that's just wonderful. I think it just, and nothing against sports or whatever, but I think the arts are just as important, and only not in America. But I really do. I think exposure to the arts they can save lives and change lives, and so yeah, I totally agree. Thanks for such a well phrased and perceptive comment.
If I could just chime in, one of the reasons why I love talking to writers and that I love reading, and I think everybody who's on this program with us probably feels the same, is there's magic when you read something and you recognize yourself, or you say, I felt like that. There's somebody else in this world who feels the way that I do. And even if it's a fictional character, the person who wrote that fictional character gets me, understands me, so I'm not alone anymore. And for a kid, that's amazing, and it's magic, and it is life-changing, because you don't feel alone, you don't feel isolated, you don't feel like you're weird or different, you feel like you're part of something. And so, hooray for the authors.
Oh, well, yeah, I could not agree more. I think that is exactly, what art does, is that it makes us feel not alone, and that's so important, because it's so, especially in those formative years, it's so easy to feel like, you don't even know who you are yet, but you know that, whatever.
But somebody else out there seems to know who you are, even if you don't.
And then that's so important, and that's so, I'm sorry, life affirming. It just is. It just makes things, it makes everything worthwhile. So totally agree.
Yeah, fun comes out. Well, my goodness, we could keep talking for another hour and a half, I think.
This was so fun. Thank you so much, Kathy. It was such a pleasure to just do this with you. I really had a great time.
Well, I hope you will come back and talk to me again and talk to all of us.
I absolutely will.
Even if, and it's going to get published, but your sequel to Beautiful Music is going to get published. But if it doesn't, you come back, you read us a chapter a week, and we're going to talk about it.
Well,
get it out there.
That could happen. I'm not going to lie to you.
Nope, it's going to be okay. So in the meantime, though, if you haven't read The Narcissism of Small Differences, you need to read it, because it's really good, especially if you're in the midlife range. But even if you're not, you can see what you have to look forward to. And and it's funny. It's funny, and it's a great, wonderful shout out to Detroit. So thank you, Michael, for coming and
thank you.
Talking to me and answering questions. It's just been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Same for me. Thanks, Kathy. Bye, Anna.
Stay in touch.
Okay.
Good night, everybody. Have a good night.